So before we dive in here, I would like to introduce Scott McFarland. Scott is the executive director of Serve Illinois. Um, he's the executive director of Illinois' Commission on Volunteerism and Community Service and director of Illinois' AmeriCorps programs. Those programs have brought in over $100 million of investment into Illinois communities each year. He joined Serve Illinois in 2006 and executive director since 2014. So Scott, I will turn things over to you to give us a welcome. So welcome, Scott.
Thanks, and thank you everybody for attending today. This is based on a registration. It's going to be the most well-attended ICOVA ever, so that's exciting. One of the unknown benefits of everyone being stuck at home is we get more people to work together. I want to take a moment just to thank the planning committee for putting this on, and as well as Michelle Hannikin from my staff, who has been working hard to get this put on throughout the year. So we're really happy to have you here. Just a real quick, Serve Illinois, as was mentioned, is the state's Commission on Volunteerism and Community Service. It's our mission to get everyone in Illinois to volunteer. And we have a lot of work ahead of us. Right now, about a little bit over a quarter of all Illinoisans are giving back in service every year. But that quarter of Illinoisans are giving nearly $6 billion of service each and every year to their communities. So the goal here, and the goal at our three other conferences we put on, Central Illinois Volunteerism Conference, Northwestern Illinois Volunteerism Conference, and Southern Illinois Volunteerism Conference, is to get all of you talking about how we can recruit, retain, and reward our volunteers and get them to bring new people to the field too, so they're serving their communities. Obviously, right now, a lot of us are working with COVID-19 issues, but we've also got a humanitarian crisis that's going to be going on for a lot longer than just the virus. And so we're all going to have to be working together to get ourselves back out of this. And volunteerism is going to be the solution to that. So we're looking forward to working with all of you to do that. A couple other things just to highlight real quick is we do also recognize volunteers quite a bit through the commission. One thing I want to bring up to everybody, so you have it all on your radar, is we have the Governor's Hometown Awards. Governor's Hometown Awards are given out yearly. If you've driven through the highways and byways of Illinois, you've probably seen the Governor's Hometown Award sign. Those applications for communities will be going out here later this fall. So please be on the lookout for that. We'll be accepting the applications, and then we will be awarding Hometown Awards in the springtime. And then also we have the Governor's Volunteer Service Awards. These are for individual volunteers. And we'll have those nominations going out in 2021. So be on the lookout for that too. Just two really easy ways to recognize people who are serving in your community. And we love to highlight the great work that all you are doing. So I will end it there, but again, thank you all for coming out today. I'm looking forward to hearing from our great speakers. And if you ever need from me, I will put my email in the chat, and we'll be happy to help you out where we can. Thanks, everybody.
So Scott, we have a quick question here that says, how do you calculate the monetary value of volunteers' time? You mentioned
yes.
The $6 billion. So I want to know if you could share that with the group.
Yeah, and I'll put this link in here too. It is an organization called the Independent Sector, and they put out a value of volunteer time by state every single year. And of course, now that you've asked me that, I don't have it right here in front of me, but I'm going to have it in just a second. I'm at their website, and I will give you the Illinois number that just updated. Illinois number is $27.98. So every hour of volunteerism in Illinois equals $27 and what did I just say? 89 cents. Is that right, Ted? Yes. It's early. Yeah, $27.98. I will put that in the chat. So that is a recognized number throughout the country. So if you're ever writing a grant or looking to highlight what your volunteers are doing, $27.98 an hour is a recognized number that you can be using.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. So where do we go from here? Let's discuss where engagement goes. So how do you engage volunteers when you can't be face-to-face? how do you even approach virtual engagement when technology is not your strong suit? Um, how do you ensure you're giving volunteers what they need and what they want actually in these times? So let's find out together. Jay Vincent is our first speaker. He leads Outreach Experts, the firm he founded nearly a decade ago to help companies and organizations create meaningful and sustainable relationships with their stakeholders. He also publishes The Daily Line, a Chicago-based digital-first news publication focused on public policy and government in the city of Chicago, Cook County, and Springfield, Illinois. Today, he is a creator at the intersection of business, government, and technology, helping companies and organizations develop innovative solutions to navigating the challenges posed by a more interested public and interested stakeholders. So where does engagement go from here? Jay, I hope you can help us out in this one. So Jay, I'll turn things over to you. I know it seems like you're getting your screen shared up there, and I will turn things over to you.
Well, good morning, everybody. And I'm hoping that you can see me right now. And Tyrone, I'm hoping that you can confirm that you can see the first slide of my presentation here and not the notes section. Can you all see that?
We can see the notes section.
Okay, I'll just swap displays again and we should be all set.
Yep, so let's do it.
Wonderful. Well, good morning, everybody. My name's Jay Vincent, and as Tyrone was sharing, I'm here to talk a little bit about, kind of what to do. Where do we go in this time of COVID? And I with the title here, I certainly don't mean engagement in the sense that more in the love in the time of cholera or any sort of wedding engagement. Instead, I'm talking about how do we engage with people? And what I've tried to do here this morning is develop an illustrative guide to adapting and innovating in engagement during this time. But before we delve into that, I wanna not talk about this thing that I'll only mention once, this new normal, this horrible oxymoron that's out there, kind of being used to push us towards this kind of digital transformation. And instead, I want to reflect quickly with you on kind of what are the core values of supporting and leading volunteers. And I think your professional association lays it out nicely. And I do think that there's some transformation happening on this front too. But first, it's core values: citizenship, respect, accountability, fairness, trust. Those are the 5 ethical values of leading volunteers. Now, I think there will be some changes in the way that we talk about those and the words that we use to characterize what we mean. In fact, citizenship may become less important than residence might be. Respect may stay in place. Accountability may become transparency and openness. Fairness, we'll talk about in a moment, but I think it becomes something more along the lines of diversity and equity. There's also a framework for these 5 core ethical values, and it's about being accessible to diverse groups, operating ethically with your stakeholders, maintaining the public trust, sustaining a healthful environment, and promoting continuous improvement. And I think that's at that last kind of ethical value that your professional association has is really where we turn to kind of make sense of what's going on here. And so what does continuous improvement look like in this sort of this new normal, this digital transformation that's happening? And so I want to first, before we dive into the kind of particulars of what you can do, I want to talk about some guiding principles. And first, diversity and equity is paramount amidst this digital transformation. As an expert in this field, and somebody who's been working in volunteer mobilization, in outreach, public engagement, you name it, over the past 20 years, we have had a difficult time reaching diverse groups that don't often participate. And what we know is that as a result, they feel disenfranchised. Yet, despite best efforts, it's been difficult to certainly to lead folks towards a digital transformation. So there's a lot to unpack with this, and that's not what we're going to do today, but I think front and center amidst all of this digital transformation and this new way of engaging, diversity and equity are essential for us getting it right, and getting it right Depends on what perspective you have as far as whether you're getting a permit from government, whether you're trying to mobilize volunteers for a hospital, whatever it might be. So number two, I counsel to my clients, always begin with listening. And what I want to share with you here today is volunteers' expectations and their needs are paramount. And no matter what you think, I can guarantee you, you don't truly know what they are today because so much has changed in the individual lives of all your various volunteers. So getting at to what they need, what their expectations of you and your organization are, is essential. And we'll talk a little bit about how to, how to go about that. Amongst all of this change in society, what we're seeing is the use of technology to help people communicate, help people mobilize, etc. A friend of mine, a guy named Nick O'Malley, wrote a book called The End of Big. Anybody that's on this call, I think you would very much benefit from reading it. It's a short read. You can read it in about 6 hours. I read it on a plane. It's a fascinating read about how technology is bringing down big institutions. Now, I mention this here because much of what was written in that book 5 years ago, today is orthodoxy. And everything I'm going to talk to you about today might seem shiny, might seem flashy. You've likely heard about some of it, but today it's orthodoxy. So the world's leading organizations, these are the basic things that they do. They're the best practices. And so these best practices that we'll get into a little bit here, today I want you to think of as simply orthodoxy. These are things that you ought to be doing. And even though they may seem kind of difficult to do, I hope that throughout this presentation this morning, you're going to find that it's actually quite easy to do. I want you to stay away too, while you're thinking about what you're going to do after this presentation and after Steve's presentation later on, what you're going to do with this conference information is hopefully make change inside your organization. As you're doing that and you're talking with your volunteers, the things that I counsel today, and maybe Steve will think the same way, they should not be grounded in this idea of the new normal. Okay, stay away from that oxymoron. People are tired of it, and there's enough public polling out there to suggest to you that that is something to stay away from. Instead, lead with your organization's curiosity about what these people want, what your volunteers need, etc. And additionally, if you are going to start and make change inside your organization, I encourage you to reach beyond the usual suspects. And so there are a couple of aspects to the next section of this presentation, I think, that are going to show you how you can reach beyond your normal participants and find folks that are going to help bring diversity and help bring some new views to what you're up to and new tactics to what you're up to with your organization. So what I want to do here is kind of share 7 ideas for digital engagement in the time of COVID. There are going to be things that you've heard before. There might be things that you wanted to do but didn't have the time or didn't think that you had the interest. And along the way, if you have questions, do feel free to chime in. I know that we're going to wait till the end for Q&A, but I'll lean on the team to help me identify any questions that are out there that need to be answered while we're going along together here. So the first, and let me preface this, this list that I'm going to share with you, these 7 ideas for digital engagement, by no means are they in any order except the first one. And the first one is something I think that's essential today. It's something that we normally do in the course of our work, but today we know that with at Outreach Experts, we mobilize somewhere between 50 and 100,000 advocates on an annual basis for our clients. So it just all depends on the nature of the work we do. But we know with those advocates today, from the emails that we sent them in February that got action to the emails that we send them today that don't get action, we know that there's been change in their personal lives. Some of this has been personal struggles with the virus, family members' deaths, just also anxiety and other kind of cultural things that are going on in the world today that we are grappling with. So your volunteers yesterday volunteer for different reasons today. And people that used to not volunteer, that are part of some of your lists, are people that you know, et cetera, may well be an apt volunteer today. And let me share with you a personal story. So my brother is a police officer. My sister is a nurse. My other sister is a pilot. And those 3 siblings are all essential workers. Yet my brother Don, who is in business with me at the Daily Line, and myself, we're both kind of in business, working in public relations, public participation, or media, depending on how you want to characterize it. And other than the reporters at the Daily Line, there's nothing essential about Don or me, and there's nothing essential about outreach experts, except that it helps companies, engage with their communities more effectively. So during this time, I have felt underutilized and not needed. And I think that sense is out there. And so earlier this year, when I completed my pilot's license, I actually rejoined the Civil Air Patrol. I did that. I had planned to do that, but I accelerated it because of COVID. I accelerated it because of this need. But more importantly, I wanted to feel part of something important that was actually helping to help society. So I think that's a prevalent feeling out there. And the way to get at it is to start with a survey, to one that is short and concise, completely focused on the volunteer. When I say short and concise, I mean 5 to 7 questions, and they're all about really uncovering these personal preferences that your volunteers have. How do they want to be communicated with? How frequently? One change that we're seeing on the frequency, or rather not the frequency so much, but the time of day, is we used to hear parents say, you know what, contact me between 10 and 2, and I can help you then. But we now know that those kids are at home. And so those parents now are like, contact me between 8 and 10. And so that's a difficult thing, especially for an organization that might be using volunteers for phone calls. Now this volunteer workforce is not capable of doing the work during the normal time. So what do you do with that? Don't have all the answers, but uncovering first those personal preferences is going to allow you to, or enable you to rather, kind of concoct a new categorization system for the types of volunteers. Now, if you've done this work already, wonderful. I don't think surveys today, especially with activated and mobilized volunteers, are a difficult thing or an unexpected thing for those sorts of participants. But today, people are more willing to fill in these surveys, especially if they know that they only take a short while. And then when a survey has been taken by someone, we're seeing their willingness to share short surveys via social or via email with specific people. We're seeing that increase in double-digit increases, frankly, because of the fact that folks find that they're short and that they're easy to take. And when they understand that it's really about their personal preferences, they're very much more interested in sharing it with folks as almost a recruitment tool. So,
hey, Jay.
Yeah, Tyrone, please.
We had a question that's coming in right now that I think really aligns with what you're talking about. One of our participants asked, how often can you survey the volunteers before they become overloaded?
Okay, that's a wonderful question. So start with 5, 6, 7 questions. And then after that, ask 1-question surveys. And that's the wonderful thing really about the survey technology that exists out there. You don't have to send long surveys. You can send 1-question surveys. Depending on which platforms you're on, you can have surveys daisy chained to each other, and each survey is just 1 question. So if somebody's willing to answer it, then they'll get switched over to the next question, et cetera. Remember, if this is about personal preferences, it's really about what you learn about individuals and through this survey methodology, not like grand statistics that you can put in a board deck and say, well, 83% of our volunteers want to do X, Y, and Z. Instead, what you're trying to do is understand who filled this out, and what did they tell me about their preferences. And so now we can group them into categories, which if you can group people into categories that are based on their preferences, their willingness to accept your future questions, your mobilization actions, et cetera, increases, because you are now communicating with them in the way that they want to be communicated with. So they may prefer email, they may prefer text, they may want a phone call. And so when you uncover these preferences, what you're doing, it can be a bit scary, because we're used to just sending out an email maybe to 10,000 people or 200 people. These surveys sometimes uncover facts about folks, which might mean that 3 different emails need to be sent to the previous just 1 group. But what you will find is the engagement, once those preferences are recognized and then acted upon, you will find that your engagement increases. So wonderful question. If you know that someone has given you an opinion in the past, and you ask them to do it contrary to the way that they've instructed, that is actually a limiting factor for their future participation. So it is important to be careful on that. But I see frequency of questioning or surveying become kind of superfluous, really, if you're asking short and concise questions and sticking to the asking folks who you know respond to questions. So if you bombard someone with lots of questions and they never answer them, but you keep bombarding them, you're pushing them away. Whether you know it or not, you're pushing them out the door. So limiting who you're communicating with and using these surveys for not for statistical information really, but for preferences of individuals is really the way that I see using them effectively. Wonderful question. Anything else come through there, Tyrone? Cool. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move to the next slide here. I'm gonna just talk a bit about what we're seeing our clients do, what we're seeing some of our partners and competitors do with their clients. New and repurposed content. So I am here to tell you that there is so much on your websites. I haven't even looked at all of your websites, nearly all of your websites, but knowing this through the work that I've done over the years, there is so much content on your website that people have not seen, especially volunteers. And it's content that you wish they've seen. A big part of our work at Outreach Experts is building these employee engagement action centers. And when our clients come to us to help them develop a solution, they are constantly lamenting the fact that, gosh, we put all of this information about our corporate strategy on the website, and we've sent emails to our employees, except they don't know. The level of information they have about, or understanding or knowledge they have about our corporate strategies are really non-existent. And so it's not that they've done a bad job with that content. In fact, that content is typically perfect. It needs to be repurposed. It needs to be delivered in different ways. So if you've been looking at doing a newsletter over the years and you haven't yet gotten to a newsletter, I think today is the day to experiment with that. If you have a newsletter and you're not seeing the traction with it, I think going out to those that read it and those that don't read it with a survey, this is the time to do that. People are more willing to engage with you in a digital way today than they were just 6 months ago. That's just kind of a well-known fact that everybody on this call understands. So this is now the time to seize that willingness, because a year or 2 or 3 from now, what we're going to find is that this door has closed again, and that people are settling back into some of the old ways, despite the fact that we'll be living permanently in this digital context. So get out there and repurpose your newsletters, repurpose content on your website. There are also, the same idea of being short and concise applies here to content. Number one, we find that guides to understanding an organization are kind of like almost an orthodoxy in itself. So, creating not a 6-page brochure about your organization, but a guide to your organization for volunteers. Something very specific that lays out all the bullet points and gives them a clear path to get the rest of that information that would normally be in your 6-page brochure. Folks want executive summary level information. So that's what you should be delivering to them. Now, there's all sorts of content to repurpose on your site. And I'm not going to go through the laundry list of things, but I do think, especially as it comes to volunteers, that treating them almost like an internal stakeholder is essential. So you'll see I have board reports here. And what we have seen be very successful in mobilization lately is sharing information with volunteers and external advocates for our customers, sharing board level information with them. So, hey, sharing with them the quarterly report that they just gave to investors, repurposing that for content for volunteers, so volunteers can authentically speak about the health of the organization or the health of the company, as it may be. It's also essential to understand kind of what are the aspects and the mission of your organization and the value of your organizations, and ensuring that your volunteers can speak to those as well as a senior level executive at the organization. This This simple last step is the best way to make your volunteers authentic and believable with those that are engaging your organization's stakeholders. So don't be afraid to launch new content right now. And the reason you shouldn't be afraid is because it's very likely you have already written that content, and the folks that you wish have read it will now have a better chance of reading it because you've taken some action to shorten it up, to make it a bit more tight, or to make it particularly relevant to that stakeholder. So repurpose that content. Don't, and most times folks will say, don't reinvent the wheel. I'm telling you, reinvent the wheel here. You are basically, you should take your own content and begin to push it out. You can do this. You can find out what people are aware of through the survey methodology, but my recommendation to you is stick with the advice for that first survey, and then get this information about what other information they want to know, need to know, et cetera, through future individual surveys. So that's new and repurposed content. The next is volunteer recruiters, and I began to hear Scott talk a bit about this, and I think this right here is a great way to mobilize your best volunteers today, and it's a mission critical sort of activity to help you grow and to basically put beside your worries about your growth rate and your volunteer retainment rate. So use your volunteers to recruit more volunteers. And when I say this, I think that in a way today, you want to know that they're obviously your superstar volunteers, but I think lowering the bar for volunteer participation today is the way to effectively grow your volunteer recruiter for tomorrow, or your volunteer manager for tomorrow. Bring people in with small activities. And if you have these kind of less rigorous activities for potential volunteers, you will have a set of recruiters built into your volunteer system already. The way that you can identify them is using this as a particular question inside the survey that we talked about at first. Are you willing to recruit other volunteers? That's a question that we undoubtedly would put in a survey. If you're going to do a survey, absolutely make sure that you're asking your volunteers if they are willing to recruit. If they are, those folks should be immediately put on a separate track with almost their own category. They become your kind of super volunteers in a way. Now, one thing that you want to be sure that you do for your volunteer recruiters is let them know that you're going to provide instruction and training for them, because there is both, there's a technology piece to this, because you want a recruiter to be able to easily recruit volunteers, and you want it to be trackable. So if you are going to be using some software to help your recruiters do this, make sure that you provide training for it. These trainings are very much visual. They should be recorded when you're doing it, and that way they can be delivered to future volunteer recruiters, thus reducing the workload. You won't have to actually train them individually in the future. You'll just be able to deliver some of these video assets from these initial volunteer recruitment trainings. Now, people volunteer for all sorts of different reasons, and it's depending on what type of organization you are. Some people might not be willing to recruit more volunteers. Maybe their volunteerism with your organization is more of a private matter for them or something along those lines. So if you sense that there is some complexity to this for your stakeholders in particular, I'd encourage you to form a task force, one that's got a very clear and distinct mission from the rest of what your organization is doing with volunteers. And it should only really be stood up to answer this question of how do we appropriately recruit new volunteers with our current cadre. Next, and I think if I had to prioritize these, this would come right after the survey. Online mobilization. Whether you're recruiting volunteers, whether you're a volunteer organization or you're an advocacy organization, whatever it might be, you need digital actions on your site to sustain interest and participation with those that you care about mostly, or you care about most. So whether it's giving them the ability to send an email to their elected official or send an email to their city council, whatever it might be. That is essential today, enabling their voice so that they can talk to decision makers about why they are volunteering at your organization. You want to be able to give them shareable, and I didn't put it in here, but I often say it, snackable content. You want it to be easy to read and easy to share. It should be on your website and your social that you're putting a lot of activity and a lot of effort into today. There are easy ways to get that social content onto your actual website today, which is going to increase the ability for your volunteers to share. And it's also going to reduce this burden of having to feed this content beast that exists in your organizations, also known as the website. So giving them petitions to sign, resolutions to share. One that we are seeing really great results from today is actually the pledge. Pledging to do something, pledging to do one of several different things. And I didn't put that on as a bullet point here, but I'd be remiss if I didn't share with you that this is a big one today. And I think not only do volunteers take pledges, but a volunteer can share a pledge that isn't about volunteering, but it's about caring for the things that they care about related to the organization that they're volunteering for. So pledges are a great way to identify volunteer recruiters as well. Volunteer recruiters that sign a pledge to recruit 5 volunteers, to recruit 10 volunteers, whatever it might be, is an effective tactic today. So this here is the most orthodox of all the things that are in this guide to engaging during the time of COVID. Online mobilization is obviously here to stay, and as more people become used to receiving digital content and digital requests from your organization, this will become more important for them to see and be able to take action on. I want to pause and say one thing. You'll see here it says emails to decision makers and supporters. An email, your typical advocacy email says something to the effect of, I want you to support XYZ policy. But sometimes a more effective advocacy email is the one that comes before the issue is risen to the decision maker's mind and is more built around not a specific decision, but a set of beliefs. And so, remember that these resolutions can be kind of transformed into emails that your supporters and volunteers can send to influencers that tell them why they're volunteering. And that segues nicely into one of the other things that you really need to start doing. This was important, kind of growing as COVID hit in the political world. Capturing video right on your own computer and being able to publish it to the campaign's website, publish it to the organization's website, etc. But what we know from survey after survey is that individual stories have way more influence on decision makers, on individuals, than any petition, any rote email, any form, template, letter, etc. So people with their face, their eyes, talking direct to camera about why they are doing what they are doing. Taking that and turning it into some sort of produced video testimony or a short story is a wonderful way to use your volunteers. Now, what you will find is that some people that aren't your volunteers that you've thought that aren't interested in your organization are going to be interested in doing this because they view their voice as the way that they articulate their support. So you're going to find new volunteers, so to speak, by endeavoring with this tactic, going out and soliciting video testimonials from your supporters. You've seen them all over the web. Some are highly produced, look like they've cost millions of dollars. Some are, it looks like somebody was at their front steps just using their iPhone. I am going to fall on it's better to be on the front steps with the iPhone than it is to spend a lot of resources in putting fancy animations and things like that inside these stories. The more produced it looks, the less authentic it looks. So lean in on getting raw video testimonials from people and doing your best to publish that from your organization with really only maybe a logo or some sort of mission orientated message that you layer on top of it. So be sure to open it up to all known supporters, get at the why, and publish, if not everything, darn near everything you get. It doesn't matter how they say it, the sentiment gets through. So if somebody didn't say it perfectly, don't worry about that. Perfection in this context is absolutely the enemy of progress. So let it be in there. Now, this next one is one that we've seen fits and starts. I can remember 2 years ago, technology rags and advocacy rags basically saying the webinar's dead, the town hall's dead. And there is nothing further from the truth. In fact, corporate organizations have transitioned to digital town halls very quickly and well before COVID hit. So this is almost an expectation these days, is ongoing web video, webinars, town halls that are all digital. Now, if this seems kind of overwhelming, I want you to just know, make it simple, keep it short, use the presentation decks that you have today, and start out with doing webinars or town halls on the issues you need to talk about. Don't make them 30 minutes or 45 minutes long. Make these 15 minutes long. If they're a town hall and you want Q&A, make them 30. But where they're an hour long, ain't nobody got time for that. Make them short. And be sure to record. I was excited to hear that you're going to be recording this morning, because this can be shared and is now a raw piece of content that you can use for all sorts of purposes. Now, all of this activity is designed to get your volunteers mobilized. And so if they're mobilized and they're doing good work, today we're not going to have an annual conference where we hand out that Volunteer of the Year award. And maybe even not next year. I know that for my professional association, the International Association of Public Participation, we aren't going to have one this year. It's gone virtual. Next year, they're already saying that it's likely to be partly virtual. So we're getting away from that. So what we want to be able to do is engage on new turf, be able to display the work of all volunteers, so everyone can see. And so this concept of leaderboards has become something that we use sparingly in past years, but now is becoming a really important way for us to showcase what they're up to and to create some friendly and responsible competition, frankly. These leaders or these volunteer leaders are doing amazing work, and some of them are doing it in one area and others doing it in the next, and distinguishing those key areas or the key ways that they're volunteering is a way to showcase their work. Now, when I say these leaderboards, often these are actually built right into the Volunteer Action Center or the Member Action Center, so that when they log in to get their instructions for volunteering, or they log in to get their to schedule what time they're going to volunteer, they're going to see names, maybe their number of points for how many recruitments they've gotten, or they'll see areas of the country, et cetera. So that's for folks that are signing into kind of a digital hub. If you don't have that digital hub today, and that's something that you're looking to do, that's kind of one of the expertises we have at Outreach Experts. And I'm actually going to give the folks here this morning some advice on some of the technologies you can use for the future. But if you're not, set up to do that digitally today, but you are emailing your volunteers, this is something that you can easily add in as just content into your emails. In fact, any newsletter, any communication that isn't specific to some sort of event really should always include some sort of volunteer kudo or reference to excellent work, et cetera. This, with volunteer organizations, is much more essential than other sorts of advocacy causes that we work on. So you really want to make sure you're displaying the work of all volunteers to be seen by all. You want to do your best to create friendly and responsible competition. And when I say friendly and responsible competition, I actually do mean that, which means when you see unhealthy competition, it's actually essential to nip it in the bud, to not allow that to kind of contaminate the goodwill that you're really trying to build around this competition. And then lastly, as I've mentioned, showcase key actions in the activity of your volunteers. And so if we are truly in the midst of this digital transformation, and it's here to stay, which I do believe that, then we're all going to need new technologies. We're all going to need new ways to basically participate in this new orthodoxy of digital engagement and digital mobilization. So the good news is people have been thinking about this, and they've been thinking about it a lot. And so the technologies that you saw just 6 months ago have all, in some way, and this is the great iterative development style of many technology firms, where they're rolling out new features based on what they're learning. And I've seen some do it really well. I've seen some do it poorly. I've seen some do it, just like they're learning, they're faking it till they make it, like we all do at times. But I put together 2 lists for technologies for the future. One is going to base itself around engagement technologies, kind of hubs, so to speak. And then the second one is going to be about volunteer mobilization tech in particular. But let's start with engagement technologies. Anybody that would like these, you can Google these, no problem. They'll all be able to be found. I didn't bother putting the websites on here because it just seemed to be, something easily done by Google. This is not a ranked list, but I put the first one here, Bang the Table, as one that is likely the best. They're all a little different from each other. They don't all serve the same purpose. But the first 3 I'm very familiar with. I've worked with. I actually own part of the third one, Polko. I'm an investor in that company. And the other 3, I'm very familiar with the founders. But Bang the Table is an all-in CRM hub for engagement, whether it's with volunteers, other stakeholders, et cetera. It all builds into your website, or it can be the hub completely for your website. So it can either be a part of it or be the entirety of your website, whether it's for a project, a hospital, an organization, whatever it might be. And Bang the Tables basically gives you the ability to understand the opinion on everybody who's participating in the implementation or the instance of the Bang the Table software. So if you're using this to determine whether or not a new hospital wing should be built, and you're engaging the community, you're engaging your internal volunteers and stakeholders, et cetera, Bang the Table is to be used by all of them. And it has built-in survey, built-in social media, built-in email templates, essentially functions like a website. And when people sign up and get their own username and password, everywhere they go, you learn a bit more about that stakeholder. So Bang the Table is really worth the look for many of you. MetroQuest and Polko are really kind of question survey methodology focused entities. Entropy, the Hive, and Citizen Lab are also essentially hubs like Bang the Table. But these are all well-established engagement technologies. All of them have some sort of 30-day free try. Some of them have a free or a freemium model where you can use it for free if you want to ask just a few questions, and then grow up to some sort of paid subscription. So,
Jay, do you know if any of these are HIPAA compliant?
So, no, I don't know offhand if any of these are HIPAA compliant. I would wager, knowing that that's often something that is an afterthought for many of these organizations, I would imagine that these are not HIPAA compliant.
Awesome. Thank you, Jay.
I would mention, though, I'd be happy to amend this list and go get you a couple that have that are HIPAA compliant. I did not think about that for this one, but I'd be happy to do that.
No worries. Thank you.
You're welcome. So next, volunteer mobilization tech. Not sure what folks are using today, but some of these are going to be foreign owned. And that's just the reality with a lot of this engagement and volunteer mobilization tech. Remarkably, in Australia, they've kind of got a head start on a lot of this work. And so you see a lot of these good pieces of technology coming out of these, but these are all equal in my mind. Mobilize, Boardable, Volunteer Hub, Team Kinetic, and VOMO. I'm very familiar with Mobilize and Boardable. I've heard great things about Volunteer Hub, Team Kinetic, and VOMO. The last one there, VOMO, is probably on a content basis, really generating some really interesting content about how their product solves some of the challenges with volunteerism. So I definitely would encourage a look at that. So I shared the engagement tech and the volunteer mobilization tech is really just a way to kind of show you that there are technologies out there today that can accomplish all of the things that I talked about in the first kind of the 7 ways to engage here during and beyond the pandemic. Because, despite all of this change that we are undergoing as a civil society, as well as just a society, with respect to COVID, these are not new things. And in fact, much of this technology is kind of engendered from those movements well before they kind of hit the national, the national headlines. The importance of participation, the importance of diversity and equity, I see them built into all of these various pieces of technology. And in the end, digital technology, in my view, is going to be a great field leveling sort of transformation. It's essential that we get digital internet essentially into everyone's home. We can't have this transformation result in still a group of people that can't access this new digital framework that will serve to, to basically subjugate them. It will serve to disconnect them from, this transformation. And that's so getting broadband everywhere is got to be a part of this overall strategy. And I know that's not part of our discussion this morning, but I did want to recognize it is because, yes, all of this can be great, but if it's just the current system in a digital context, we have failed. Clearly, we have failed. And before I move into Q&A here, because I know I just have 1 more minute until we can do that, I want to say that for the better part of 5 years, we've been trying to figure out a way at Outreach Experts to get people who don't normally participate in the processes of getting a project permitted for government, whether it's a hospital in a local context, an energy pipeline, a transmission line for electricity, et cetera. There are stakeholders that are excluded because of they work 2-3 jobs. They are excluded because the meetings happen at 9 a.m. and they have a job that they have to go to, et cetera. Digital can fix that, but it can not replace some of the, well, that's not the best way to say it. Digital will fix that, but if it just becomes, okay, now we have it online for you, and you can do it anytime you want. If someone doesn't have the ability to do that at home, and they must do that at their workplace, that still isn't going to work. So it's really, along with this transformation, I also don't want folks to be fooled by or by the belief that we're not going to go back to face-to-face contact, because as all of us, I think, know, if we just take a look at our personal lives, like we're all pining to go hang out with our friends somewhere again. We're pining to see our relatives without having to worry about infecting them or getting infected from them. So that is all going to come back, especially for those that have been actively participating as civic participants, as citizens, or as residents in the machinations of government. So we are going to go back to that. But these pathways that we create today, they will be permanent. And these will become ways where your volunteers will be more willing to participate in what you have going on in an organization. So I'm going to stop talking. I could talk about this stuff all day. I'd love it if there was any questions, Tyrone.
There are a lot of questions. Thank you so much, Jay. We have a couple of questions from the chat. Do you have suggestions for ensuring non-tech savvy volunteers are not left out?
Identifying them is number one. So knowing who's non-tech savvy. And I think that is someone who doesn't have internet. If someone says they're not tech savvy, but they can answer their email, I'd spend my time communicating with them over email. And I would also encourage them to remove this "I'm not tech savvy" constraint from their mind, because the reality, these tools are so easy to use today, both for the propagator of those services, but also the volunteer user of those services, that there shouldn't be any large barriers other than getting access. And also, if there is that level of complexity where they're still being confused, I would challenge the creator, not of the technology, but of the user of that technology, the organizational user. I would challenge them to find ways to make it more simple.
Thank you. This question is coming from Rebecca. I work for a large organization that has a few thousand volunteers. One of their biggest complaints is that they get too many emails. So in our effort to send less surveys, we try to group information together, surveys, etc., which essentially means they're getting longer emails with more detail and don't read them all the way through. How do we find a balance?
It's trial and error. And it's also realizing that not every volunteer needs to receive every communication. Paying attention to your analytics is going to tell you right away who you should continue sending email to. And there's a selfish reason to look at this, and then a practical reason to look at this. Typically, the people that tell you, and this is the practical reason, typically people that tell you that they're receiving too many emails from you are actually the people that are not reading your emails. So I challenge you to actually go and pull it out in your mind. Like, who are the 2 or 3 loud complainers that we've heard about? I get too many emails. And go back and look and see if you can find, if you're using a MailChimp or something like that, go back and look at their record and see how many emails they're actually opening. And if you have the level of detail that says, like, okay, I can actually see that they read it for 3 minutes, then I'll admit to being wrong. But if they're just opening it and moving on, I wouldn't say that that's reading. And I also would say that you should just stop actually communicating with that person. You know, there might be a group of people that you decide to send a sole email to that says, hey, we sent off a volunteer communication today. Here's a link to it if you're interested, period. That's all they get. But then these adopted readers, these folks that really read what you're sending out, they get the normal newsletter. So it's about you adapting to them. And sometimes it's about realizing that not every of your thousands of volunteers, not every one of them needs to receive every communication. So I would start there, but that is a challenge, and it is one that you should look at the data on open rates, sharing rates, etc.
Thank you. And I think we have time for just 2 more questions. Do any of these online platforms for volunteer engagement allow e-signatures for forms needed to volunteer within an organization, such as DCFS background authorization forms?
So they may not have them built in, but there's a number of widgets that you can use to plug in e-signature functionality to your websites. And a lot of times that today is what it's about. There's still a lot of legal concern around these e-signatures, so many of these platforms haven't kind of built it in yet. But the well-known e-signature platforms are all creating plugins for WordPress websites and other kind of content platforms that are popularly used. So that's the direction I would go. I would go look for one of those kind of third-party e-signature plugins for your platform. But you know, that in itself, I'm so glad that this is a question, because you need to, not you, the person that asked me this question, but all of us should be looking at ways to digitize all of our forms. And while there are certain HIPAA requirements, or maybe there are legal requirements in some cases for folks to, you know, have to have an e-signature, but if you don't have that sort of constraint, you know, any platform will do, in my view. Digitizing it is going to save staff time that can be better used for, talking with folks. So digitizing that is essential. So many of these platforms will allow you to build forms in any way that you need to.
Great. And one last question. This is from Erica. Adjusting to all of the changes can be overwhelming for people uncomfortable with experimentation. What advice could you offer for someone feeling nervous or pressured about dramatically shifting their approach to volunteer engagement?
Great question. So the company tagline for Outreach Experts is transform your allies into advocates. Anytime you're making change, and I'm sure Steve Thomas is going to have some thoughts on this, having looked at his background. I don't know Steve, but having looked at his background, I know he's going to have some changes on this. Don't go making these changes alone. Build a coalition. Use best practices in stakeholder engagement to know that who needs to be part of this process, whose approval do you need, and approval is a loose term, but who do you want on your side? Look at this as a campaign. And then lastly, know that the enemy of progress is perfection. And I think if you tell people that, if you say that, listen, I'm not certain this is the perfect way for us to go about this, but we have a good framework for how to experiment here. And when you're experimenting, often you're not experimenting with everyone in the universe of your volunteers. Maybe you're only is communicating with a very small group of people. And if you're looking at a change process that's maybe a little more grand than experimenting with a newsletter or, maybe trying to do a webinar or something along those lines, if you're looking at something a little bit more grand, this might be a time for a task force or, an actual change management team. And that might sound complex, but it's not. If you just kind of use the rules of the road of how you want to be treated. And I do really believe that. I think there's a lot of great literature out there, a lot of great academic knowledge about how to motivate people, how to lead change management, et cetera. And I think all of that's valid. But when it all boils down to is you want to treat people the way that you want to be treated. And the way to treat people the way that they want to be treated is to ask them questions about it and to involve them in the process. And part of my work at Outreach Experts is, we do big projects, but the other part of our work is helping hold hands and helping guide people, in the program. They want to run their own program. They really want to do all the hard work. They just need somebody to bounce ideas off of. And, I'd be remiss if I didn't just kind of end with this slide here and say that I would love to be a partner in that for you. Again, my name is Jay Vincent. My mobile number's here. This is my email address, and reach out to me. I'd be happy to, I'd be happy to give you a free hour of sharing some advice and listening. And if you wanted me to give it a proposal beyond that, I'd be thrilled to do that. These don't need to be expensive endeavors. In fact, I find that when organizations are doing the hard work themselves, it's much more likely that they're going to be successful and dedicated to it. Whereas clients that pay us to do all the implementation and all the heavy lifting and all the hard work, it ends up being a case where often we don't get to implement in the way that we believe we should, because they haven't, they're not looking at it as something they're doing. They're looking at it as it's something that they're having someone else do. And there's just a totally different dynamic. So give me a call. I don't know. I think there's a few hundred people on this phone call, and I'd love for all of you to call me up and ask me for an hour. It might take me a while to get through all that, but I'd be happy to do it. So I think the work that you're doing is fantastic. I'm really grateful to Tyrone and Jan and Alicia for inviting me to be part of this conversation. I'm going to stick on with you all for a little bit and listen in. I won't bug you all with questions, but I do believe in what you all do. And I am a volunteer, a dedicated volunteer myself for a variety of organizations. I serve on a board. I raise money for that organization. And I know that the work that you all do is difficult, because I do it for a living and I do it in my personal life. And so I'm grateful to all of you for the work that you do. And Scott, I wanted to say that love the Serve Illinois website. I joined up on it right after COVID struck, I think like March 21st, something along those lines. you'll find j.vincent@gmail in your database. So thanks for putting put together a great website and frankly an awesome tool that I hope continues to grow. I'll stop sharing, and if there's any other questions, Alicia, feel free to ask, or we may want to transition. Up to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jay. We're going to keep moving along. For those who had questions that weren't able to get answered, we will work with Jay to get those questions answered offline, and we'll get those sent out in our email that goes out after the conference. So where do we go from here? So let's discuss where we as professionals go from here. Every leader, team, and organization will get stuck at some point. Many, many times actually. In this session, we will discuss the challenges faced in sustaining effective leadership during the stuck and tough times. You'll gain a greater understanding of the practices effective leaders have used to navigate through crisis. We can actually grow through these weird times and use them to our advantage, which is why we should not waste a good crisis. Steve Thomas, our next speaker, invests his life in helping a variety of organizations build leadership, develop people, and create teamwork. To put it simply, he helps people navigate through the complexities of human weirdness. He genuinely wants to see people live better lives and has a passion to develop people to get the most out of their leadership. It is not a secret that great people make great organizations. So where do professionals go from here? And how do we not waste a good crisis? Steve, I'll let you take it from here.
All right, man. Thank you so much, Tyrone. I appreciate that. And Jay, what a great job you did. I am not in this world and all the legalese and all the stuff that you guys were talking about, but even I picked up on some stuff and actually wrote some things down that kind of stuck out to me. So I kind of want to tag on something that Jay said, and we haven't met, but you know, I kind of got the same thing I guess he did with me. I got on his website and kind of looked around and kind of see what he did and what it was all about and that kind of thing. But the change thing is I'm going to pick up and just go from there, because we're in a huge disruption worldwide. And when this thing hit back in March, I actually told my wife, like, we'd been locked down, you know, here in Illinois for a few days. I'm in Springfield, Illinois, by the way, unlike Jay, who is clearly in San Francisco, right in front of the Golden Gate Bridge, which is awesome. But I am right here in Illinois. It's a joke, by the way. It was a virtual background. But anyway, and I told my wife, I said, hey, if we're going to be locked down, let's just get out of here and go somewhere. And as soon as I said it, I thought, there literally is nowhere in the world that you can go to get away from this. And so there is no more getting away. It is what it is. And so I'm a speaker, and literally everything I do is in front of people. And it has caused me to look at things differently and do some things differently. I was actually fired from 17 jobs in 10 days. So I don't know if anybody's ever done that before or not, but I'm telling you, man, I had 17 sessions, conferences, all those kinds of things in a 10-day span. I mean, literally every time the phone rang, I just knew what was coming. So change is coming. Change is here. We have to embrace it. If we don't, we're going to hurt ourselves, and we're going to hurt those people around us. And we'll talk about that a little bit as we kind of get into this. So when I got the email and I had the conversation with Jan, and I learned the theme was, where do we go from here? And she started kind of talking about some of the leadership issues and the team issues. For me, it was easy to slide in to this particular subject matter, because in May, I actually did my own Zoomcast, and I called it "Don't Waste a Good Crisis." And I thought, this is exactly what I want to talk to people about right now, is just don't waste a good crisis. Listen, we're in it. We can't control it. We can do very little to influence it. So here we are. And so let's use it and use it to our advantage. And I begin to study, and I begin to look at crisis and what that means, and kind of how that goes with people, and what we've done before and what teams do in crisis and what leaders do in crisis. And so I learned that the word crisis actually originally kind of referred to a turning point. There was a time, most of the time in a sickness or in a disease, there was a turning point, and that turning point was determined the crisis point. Is this going to get better or is this going to get worse? And there were times that in that turning point, it was up to the individual. And I think that's kind of where we are now, is that we are and have been and will be for a little while at this turning point. And what are we going to do with it? And I started looking at all different kinds of crises that all of us have in our lives. And this is clearly not the only crisis we've been through. And it's not the only crisis that we are going to go through. Just want to give you all something to look forward to. Because when this one is over, there's going to be another crisis right around the corner. Now, crisis comes in all different shapes and sizes. There are natural crises like the one we're in right now. There are what I call you cause crisis. Some of us have been through crisis and you caused your own crisis. So I call it a you cause crisis. There's a midlife crisis that I'm sure there are some of you on this call that could probably relate to midlife crisis. There's adversity, there's loss, there's change, there's challenge, there's disruption, there's all kinds of crises. We face it all the time. So I really like what Jay said about not using the phrase the new normal. Or here's another one, this unprecedented crisis that we're in right now. The only thing unprecedented for me has been the amount of times that I've heard the word unprecedented. So listen, this is what it is. It's not a new thing. It's not an old thing. It's just a thing, and we're gonna have to walk through it. So there's any event at all that's going to lead to unstable or dangerous situations, that is a crisis. So what are we going to do with it, and what are we going to allow it to do for us, and what will crisis do for you and your team and your situation? So Martha, I also learned that the Chinese symbol for crisis actually denotes two words: danger and opportunity, which I found that to be, I heard that years ago and didn't pay much attention to it then because I didn't really need to. But I love the fact that there is opportunity and danger at the same time. What are you going to do with it? There's a lady named Martha Beck, and she said, any crisis is an opportunity to make your life extraordinary in some way. So what are we going to do with this or any other crisis for that matter? So here's what I've learned. I've learned that there are 4 things that, don't try to write these down in case you're taking notes, because these are going to come up one at a time. We're going to chat about these one at a time. There are 4 things that that crisis will do for teams if teams and organizations will allow it. First of all, it gives us a way clearer perspective than what we had before. Second, it pulls us together. Third, it reveals a mindset. What I've noticed is that crisis doesn't set a mindset. It doesn't cause a mindset. It actually reveals a mindset. And then fourth is that crisis forces us to shift our context a little bit. So I kind of want to take a look at each one of these and show you how these relate to your leadership and how it relates to your team and to your organization and what you can do in walking through this. So first of all, crisis gives us a clearer perspective. What we need to do when we hit any kind of a crisis, again, whatever that means to you, is we've got to recalibrate. We've got to focus on the win. And this is what has happened through this whole situation, is I think people are starting to learn what really is important to me, what really is important to us. And I work with a lot of teams all over the country, just developing leadership and developing team and culture and those kinds of things. And every single team that I have been with on Zoom and some live, I've asked this question: what have you noticed through this time? What have you noticed going on with your team through this time? And I got to be honest with you, 99% of the stuff that I have heard has all been positive. And this is one of them. that this whole thing has given us a clearer perspective, is that we are starting to focus on what really matters. And when you hit a situation in which there's loss or adversity or, again, crisis of any kind, you start to pay attention to what is right in front of you and what really matters, and you stop paying so much attention to the peripherals around us that sometimes we get caught up in that we really don't need to get caught up in. So what is the win? What is the true win? What is your win? What are we going to do through this whole thing to determine when we're done that that was a win for us? And I think that in this time, we start to recalibrate everything, and it really gives us a clearer perspective. Here are 3 questions that I've used with teams and have really coached teams to use in their situation. What adds value? What really adds value? What do we need to do right now that adds value? And then this is not number 2, but this is part of that, is what is not adding value that we can actually take away right now, especially during this time. Second question is, what could we eliminate? What is it that we have, that if we didn't do it anymore, we wouldn't notice it in 6 months? What if we did not do this anymore, that 3-4 months down the road, everybody'd forget about it, and not only would they forget about it, they would be happy that we didn't do it anymore. So what adds value? What could we eliminate? And then this is a big one. What are we passionate about? What are we really passionate about? Here's what I learned about the word passion. Passion actually means something you're willing to suffer for. What are you willing to suffer for? And what I find is that when you hit a crisis situation, all of a sudden, there are a whole lot of things you're not willing to suffer for. That there are fewer things that you're going like, this is right now what's important to us, and this right now is what we're willing to suffer for. So what adds value? What could we eliminate? What are we passionate about? And have that kind of conversation with your team, with your volunteers, with your staff, whoever you're around, and start to iron out some of those things to get a clearer perspective through crisis. My mom, in 2016, my mom moved here to Springfield, Illinois from Wichita, Kansas, where she had lived most of her life. She moved there when she was like 9 years old, so she lived there most of her life. So she moved here, and literally 6 weeks after she was here, she was diagnosed with leukemia. And so I'm an only child, and so it's just been me and mom. It was me and mom when I was growing up for a while, because mom was divorced. And so my mom is what I would describe and have described as lovingly irritating. Now, I don't know how many of you watching have moms that are lovingly irritating, or maybe if you are a mom who is lovingly irritating, but that's kind of how I describe my mom, lovingly irritating. So we really didn't know how this was going to go, because mom and I haven't lived around each other for many, many years. And so now she's moving here, not to live in our house with us, but to live in the same area. And so I know every day I'm going to see her now, and we just really didn't know how it's going to go. So she moves here 6 weeks, and it was great. And then 6 weeks later, she was diagnosed with leukemia. Well, here's what happened to me. When she was diagnosed, the lovely, irritating part didn't matter anymore. That had a way of putting my relationship with my mom in a way clearer perspective. And what we started to focus on from that point forward is having great times together, taking advantage of the time that we know we're going to have together. That's really all that mattered at that point, is just taking care of mom and just making life great for her. Now, some of you have been in situations like that, and you know exactly what that feels like. So 3 years, almost 3 years to the date, I lost my mom last June, and I am so thankful that I was able to put away all the peripherals and just focus on what really matters. And that's exactly, when you hit tough times, that's exactly what those tough times can do for you if you allow it to. Some of you remember the story of Robinson Crusoe. and Robinson Crusoe was, I love that story. I love any movie or any show in which people are on just a deserted island. I love it, because I love watching their survival. But you remember in Robinson Crusoe, he found like bags and bags and bags of gold. while he was on a deserted island. That sounds great if you're not on a deserted island, but what good is the gold when you're on a deserted island? Clearer perspective, put everything in perspective clearly, that doesn't matter. So that's one thing that tough times will do for us, is it'll give us a clearer perspective. The next thing is I find that it pulls us together. And this is one of the things that, when I've asked teams, what have you noticed about this? This is one of the number one things come out of my mouth in some shape, form, or fashion. They say, man, this thing has really pulled us together for some reason. It's like we do Zooms more than live sessions. And for whatever reason, our communication has actually improved. So why is that? Why is that in crisis situations or in tough times or in loss, that somehow it has a way of pulling teams together? And I think it has a lot to do with what we just talked about. First thing it does, it gives us a clearer perspective. And if we will allow tough times to do it, it will pull us together. So what do we got to do as leaders? We got to reconnect, man. We have got to reconnect. And hopefully you can see this, here on the screen. You got to reconnect. In other words, be human. This is a time, anytime that anybody is hitting a tough time, a crisis situation, we, more than ever before, we got to be human. So humans are very, very social animals. Social connection is a fundamental human need that actually is linked to psychological and to physiological well-being. And I'm doing a whole part series right now, 4-part series right now on social connection and what that means. I'm doing that for another organization on Zoom. And in fact, today I have another session with that. So I'm big on connection, man. I listen, we are wired to connect with people. And more than any time, when you hit a tough time, you hit a crisis, it is time to build connection. We got to be human with people. And I don't know, one of the interesting conversations with leaders through this whole thing in talking about their leadership belief system. What do you fundamentally believe about leadership? And what I've found is that whatever you believe about leadership really comes out in tough time situations and in crisis situations. And sometimes leaders have this deep belief system that if I lead people or I am their manager, that I cannot any longer be their friend. And I got to be honest with you, man, that's one of the dumbest things that I've ever heard in leadership, is because when you become someone's leader, you actually become responsible for that person. And you may be the only friend, quote unquote, that they even have. And especially in a time like this, they need you more than ever to be a friend. Now, I'm not talking about besties and BFFs and having over to your house and, watching movies and doing each other's hair and talking feelings and future. That's not what I'm talking about. You have to create boundaries. But the higher the level of connection, the higher the level of everything else. And that's what people need. And that's what teams need, especially beyond crisis times. They need that. They need it, especially during crisis times. And what I've noticed is that the teams who have this built-in connection and they work on that in non-crisis times, when they hit a crisis time or a tough time of any kind, they sail right through it because they already have that built-in connection. So 3 things real quick: be available, be available, be available, be available. Be available to everybody in your organization. Be available to people that you normally are not available for. You're going to have to carve out time just to be available. Who needs me and what can I do? Who needs me and what can I do? That's being available. Be authentic. Be very real with them about your own uneasiness through crisis situations or your own hesitations, through tough times. So be very authentic, be very vulnerable with them. The third thing is just be very curious. So get into people's lives a little bit and ask the questions. And, one of the first things I start with every time I talk to somebody now is, okay, beyond the cliche, how are you really doing with all this right now? And I ask all my clients that, and I want to know, how are you doing? What do you need from me and how can I help? So reconnect, be human to the people around you. Third thing is, crisis will reveal a mindset. And so what we have to do is we have to reframe the situation. We've got to use adversity to strengthen us, not weaken us. So the mindset creates and reveals that is created and revealed through a crisis. The mindset that somebody takes with them into crisis is going to be revealed during that crisis. Sorry, I had a tough time getting that out, but that's what it is. So you got to reframe the situation. So look at the situation in a whole different perspective. You know, going back to the story of my mom, when I found out about my mom, man, it rocked my world, and it definitely rocked her world. What we had to do is we had to reframe the situation. But because her and I both share some commonalities in our faith and some commonalities in life perspective, we were okay. We're going to reframe the situation, and we're going to figure out how can we use this to make us better, and what are we going to do with this? So it reveals a mindset, you know, as we go along. So what we have to learn to do is we've got to reframe. And one of the ways that we reframe is by inspiring hope in people. Inspiring hope. Now, I've done like a 2 or 3 year study on hope. It's a fascinating study. I have been raised in a world in which I've heard about hope my whole entire life, but I have never, ever understood hope the way I understood hope in the last 2 or 3 years. Hope is not wishing. When we say to somebody, "Man, I hope you have a great day," that's really more of a wish. It only becomes a hope when there's optimism tied to it, when there's honesty tied to it, and when there is a willingness to help in the situation and to do something about it. That is when it becomes hope. Other than that, it remains a wish. Some of us, when we were little, we said, "Boy, I hope someday I can be a famous actor." Well, if you're not willing to put in the hard work and you're not willing to create a plan to get there, it's not going to be a hope. It's going to be a wish. And so what we do is we set and we wish that it would happen. In other words, we wish somebody would knock on our door and say, "By the way, tomorrow you're going to be a famous actor." That would be awesome. It's just not going to happen that way. So in order to inspire hope, we have to inspire optimism, and we have to come up with a plan to show what can happen, and vision becomes a part of that. One of the best stories that I heard going through this thing. So I would say this is about the end of March, somewhere around there. I was on a Zoomcast actually with a guy named Donald Miller. Donald Miller, I read several of his books, and I love the way he speaks, and I love the way he writes, and so I wanted to hear what he had to say. And he has a company called Story Brand, and they help organizations kind of brand themselves and create their stories and these kinds of things. Anyway, so I was on this podcast with him, and he said the week before this particular webinar that he was doing, he got his staff together, about 30 on his staff, I believe, and he said, "We're going to have a dinner on October 1st at my house, and my wife and I are cooking dinner, and we're supplying everything. All we want you to do is show up. And at that dinner on October 1st, we are going to celebrate how we came through this crisis." And I thought, first of all, I got mad because I didn't think about it. But second of all, I thought that is brilliant. And that is exactly what inspiring hope is. Inspiring hope in people to see and to create this idea and this vision of what it can be beyond where we are right now. Inspire hope in people. And that really is not even a team or staff thing. That really is anybody that you're around. But as a leader, it is our role to see what can be and to maintain the optimism that we're going to get through this. Don't be fake about it. There is such thing as realistic optimism. I'm not here to tell you that everything's going to be okay, but what I believe down deep in my gut is that everything's going to be okay. It's bad and it's been tough, but I believe that it's going to be okay. And so you got to balance that out. Don't be fake about it, but realistic optimism, but inspire hope in your people, to inspire hope. So what can we use this for? What can you control right now? Not a lot. but what is in your circle of control right now? What can you control? What can we as a team control right now? What can we actually do right now that's going to take us to another level? And then the other thing is, what are we going to celebrate? When we're done with all of this crisis or the next crisis or whatever it is, what do you want to celebrate? I coached for about 12 years. I coached high school football. I was not the coach, but I was on staff, and I did a lot of leadership and character development, and then I coached a position for a while. And the team I coach with here in Springfield had a pretty effective program. We won a few state championships. And in 2013, our second game of the season, we lost. And this particular team, when they lose a game, man, it is like, it's newsworthy, oh my gosh, what's falling apart and what's going on and blah, blah. And it was just a loss. That's all it was. And so we lost this game, the second game of the season. And I told our guys then, I told our players then, these are high school sophomores, juniors, and seniors, 15, 16, 17-year-old kids. And I said, I got to be honest with you, if this is the worst thing that ever happens to you, you are going to have a great life. So this was on Labor Day weekend. We lose this game. We get to our next practice, and just, I don't want to get into all the details about this, but it was a long practice, and there was a lot to be said at this practice, and there's a lot of adjustments that need to happen at this practice. But I'm going to tell you what happened at this practice and the next week is that loss brought these kids together. They had a way clearer perspective. But what it did is it revealed a mindset. The mindset a lot of them had was, we got this, we're okay, we don't need to work at anything. And all of a sudden it jolted and it revealed that mindset. So what we had to do is we had to inspire hope. We had to reframe, what can this loss do for us? And again, a very long story short, that year we went on to win state championship. I believe, and many of the coaches believe, had it not have been for that loss, we do not win a state championship that year. So loss, crisis, adversity. What are you going to do with it? How will you use it? What can you control? And what eventually do you want to celebrate? Number 4, it shifts our context. What we have to do as leaders is we have to rethink. Allow this to expand our creativity. Last November, I believe it was, I had a client in New Jersey ask me to do a Zoom session, a teleconference session. I'm not so sure he even knew the word Zoom, but he said a teleconference session with his team. And I said, no, I'm just going to fly out there, man. I don't, it's a learning curve for me. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't even know for sure. I don't even think I knew what Zoom was. I didn't know for sure what teleconferencing was. I'd only seen it on television. I'd never done it before. I just didn't want to go there and didn't want to try to learn it or whatever. So I said no, and I flew out there and we did, a live session. Well, in March when this thing hit, I really had no choice. I had to learn teleconferencing. I had to learn Zoom very, very quickly. And it's not that I wanted to. I did not have a choice. So I had to rethink. I had to expand my creativity. So I'm telling you, we're 5 months in this thing now, and it has been awesome for me because I've expanded and I've thought things through that I probably should have anyway, but I didn't because I just didn't have to. So now I have to. I've done countless Zooms. I'm doing my own Zoomcast once a month called Budge, and just a 55-minute leadership workout that people can log on to, and we can just talk about, insights and thoughts about leadership that's just going to help you move just the slightest bit. I will use Zoom in everything that I do going forward. I've done videos. I actually have what's called a YouTube channel now, which I didn't even know what that meant before, but I started doing these short videos and uploading those to YouTube. This has expanded my creativity, and I got to be honest with you. Has it been tough? Absolutely. Has it been tiring? Absolutely. Am I grateful for it? No question. Would not have done it had we not hit this crisis. Stuff I should be doing anyway that I'm not, and I've had to rethink, shift my context. Here a little phrase I came up with this whole thing: you're either going to morph or dwarf. That's it. You're either going to shift your context or it's going to take you down. Because if we don't shift our context and we don't move where we need to move and shift what we need to shift, it's going to do more damage than what we could really realize. And IBM did a CEO study years ago. 500 CEOs in 60 countries over 33 different industries. They found in this particular study that the single most important leadership quality was creativity. Well, creativity. What are you going to do to think differently than you've always thought before? I do a whole session on just creative thinking. I've done it for years, but I'm telling you, never has there been a greater illustration for having to rethink or having to think differently, think beyond where we have, than what we're in right now. So what are we going to do to shift our context? I love wearing jackets. I got a jacket on right now because it's, I'm here in my office, and this morning here in Springfield, it was 55 degrees outside. So I went out to Starbucks and headed back, and I had to wear a jacket. I just haven't taken it off yet. I love wearing jackets, hooded sweatshirts. I love all that. But in the last few weeks, I've been building a deck outside, and it has been stupid humid. And I'm not out there 10 minutes before I'm just soaking wet. So if I wear these jackets and hooded sweatshirts and don't shift to context, if I wear those out in that weather, I am just a complete fool. It is not going to happen. Now, I am looking forward to the day that I have to outside. I'm ready for fall, but I've got to shift to context. And this is what happens with seasons. And we in Illinois know about seasons. Seasons are going to come without any warning at all. You never get an email. You never get a memo. By the way, I'm Summer and I'll be showing up on this date. Nope. It just shows up whenever it shows up. And if you don't adjust to context, you're going to do some damage. So we always are finding ourselves shifting to context. What are you going to do with your leadership, with your thought process, with your team to shift to context? So I hope all that makes sense. I don't know if any questions have come through. I love this quote. This is a quote by a guy named Brooke Foss Westcott. And here's the quote: "Great occasions do not make heroes or cowards. They simply unveil them to our eyes. Silently and imperceptibly, as we wake or sleep, we grow strong or weak. And at last, some crisis shows us what we have become." What will you become through this or any other crisis? So I'm telling you that when tough times come, don't waste tough times. Don't waste a good crisis. Embrace it. Use it. And this is what teams do. These 4 things, what teams do, what you can do as well to kind of move through this time, and again, as we move through other adjustments and we move through other disruptions that we're going to face as we continue to move on. I really hope all that makes sense. And as Jay said earlier, I'm available to you to answer any questions. I know it's always awkward on a Zoom to ask questions, maybe, especially when there's, a couple of hundred people on. But any question you have beyond this, feel free to send an email, a text, or a Zoom, and let me know how I can help you kind of walk through any of this. So, Tyrone, do we have any questions that came through?
Yes, we had a couple of questions. One of the questions that came through, if you could just share your, I know you mentioned information about your leadership Zoomcast. I know that some people seemed interested in that.
Okay. Okay.
And I wondered if you could just say that a little slower for folks there. For them to catch that.
Yeah. It's a Zoomcast. It's called Budge, because the definition of budge is making the slightest movement. And so people need to know that small movement matters. And so that's what we're doing. We just did our first one this month, and we're going to continue this on. So, yeah, there's my website, I think.
Okay. Is that the way to sign up for it? Is through your website?
No, actually right now I'm not quite that fancy yet. So the way to sign up for it would be to send me an email, and then I can send you the link. And then once you register for it, you'll be on you'll be on the mailing list. So my email is on the website, and if you're interested in that and you want that, send an email and we'll send you the link to the next one. The next one is actually September 23rd. So
Awesome
I'm
stuff.
sorry, I did not mean at all for that to be any kind of a promo, and it's free. It doesn't cost anything, by the way. So
Hey, well, we're happy to make sure, happy to get that out there and get more people
yeah,
involved in that. And there's
yeah,
clearly
well,
people that are interested in on the call today. So I want to make sure that they are that they have access to that. Another question that came in is, some of the people on the call today are not the decision makers themselves in their organization.
Yep.
So do you have any advice for those who are looking to make sure that their leaders of their organizations don't waste a good crisis?
Yeah, so I'm gonna scroll back here to I'm going the other way, I'm sorry. So these 4 things that hopefully you wrote down, you have, and I'll just find the slide right there. These 4 things are not just team or organization things. These 4 things happen to individuals. And so take these 4 things and pick out one that you feel like right now you need to take to your leaders and start figuring out how to implement that. So whether it's getting a clearer perspective, and this is a great question to ask, and this is a whole nother conversation. I'll try to nutshell this. What is our win? And you should be asking that question anyway. Forget crisis. You should be asking that question anyway. What is our win? And so about 2 years ago, I took purpose, mission, and vision, which can basically say the same thing, and they can get very muddy and very blurry anyway. And I took vision, mission, and purpose and just combined those into this word win. What is your win? I get what your purpose, and I get that, but if you've had a great year, what does that look like? And so, well, actually, coming up on one of the budge sessions, I'm going to be talking more about that, and we'll spend the whole time talking about how you find your win and what that means and what that looks like and everything. But that's not for a few months yet. But I would take one of these and get so clear perspective. What is our win? Pull us together. Who out there needs us, or what do we need to do to start, creating that high level of connection? And again, remember this, not just through crisis, but any time. This needs to happen beyond crisis. And so take one of these and kind of figure out where your leader needs to focus on, and then take that to them. I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. I think that's great. Great feedback. There was also a question that said, is there any of the most challenging team experience you've had and how you were able to apply this, or your idea here?
Well, so a lot of my team, well, I can tell you maybe not team, but individually, so I don't have a staff. Oh, I don't even have a job for that matter. So I really don't have, I definitely don't have staff. So, but the hardest thing for me to try to apply this, and you have to know that a lot of these things was born out of losing my mom. So, I hate to keep beating on that, but a lot of these thoughts was born out of that. Over the years, as our family experienced things together, some of this was born out of that. This, in comparison to that, this may sound trite and this may sound a little weak, but remember, your reality is your reality and your pain is your pain. But some of those are born out of football illustrations, losses and injuries and those kinds of things, about how you pull it together. So I think the biggest one for me personally would have to be, the whole situation going through the 3 years with my mom and then losing her and kind of looking back on that time. So that's kind of what it is for me.
Awesome. All right. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that, Steve. I think that looks like all of the questions. Oh, one last one came in as I was saying that. For your Zoomcast, the Budge Zoomcast, is there a way to view that after the fact? Are they recorded sessions, or are they like, you got to be there to be present to win type thing?
Well, let me put it to you this way. I'm working on it. So yes, we recorded it. and now we're trying to figure out, okay, what are we going to do with it? So yes, it's possible that they will be uploaded to the website at some point.
Okay.
Not right
That's
now.
awesome news.
It's possible later. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome news. Okay, so that is in fact the last one.
All right.
Um,
Very cool.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Yeah. Hey, thank you guys, man. This has been fun. And listen, I'm proud of you for pursuing this conference, even if it's on Zoom, because a lot of people, trust me, I told you, man, 17 jobs in 10 days. A lot of people just, didn't do anything. So I'm proud of you guys for doing this. I've been live at ICOVA. That was a lot of fun. But I am really proud of you for pursuing this, because I think it's important to get people together, and it's important to talk about these kinds of issues because, and again, not to beat a cliche, but we literally are in this together. And so no one is exempt from this. And I think what you're doing is awesome. So keep it up.
I wanted to just second that, Steve. I think that's a really very salient. And I think the thing that everyone should realize is that one of the blessings of this pandemic and what we've been going through over the past few months is going to be virtual conference participation is going to be something that is going to exist.
Yep.
And be much more robust even when we go back to real life conferences. So I know that many of these organizations that you're part of, it's often that there isn't the budget so that you can go to a conference.
Right.
The conference fee might be affordable, but the $250 a night in a Denver hotel ends up being really expensive. And so this pandemic is going to deliver virtual participation as an ongoing service of these conferences. And I think that is a great benefit to society. So
I totally agree. I totally agree. And I think a great exercise for teams to do is sit down and write down all the good things, as little as they may seem, write down all the positive things that can or have come out of this. And Jay, I agree with you. I think that's one of them. Like I said before, I'll use Zoom. So here's what I would have done. If we would have been live at ICOVA, I would have done the same session live. And then I would have posted a link for a Zoom 1 month later just to follow up. And it would have been a 45-minute conversation, maybe 30, 45 minutes, just to touch base. That's one way I'm going to use Zoom in the future. So I agree, Jay. And Jay, here's another thing. I was going to say this earlier, and I'm glad you're still on because I wanted you to hear this, is that I've told all my clients, and I'll tell you guys this, if ever you're going to make a change, now is the time to make a change, because if it doesn't work, you can blame it on coronavirus. So this is the time to make the changes that you want to make. So make them. It's an easy time to make changes. So very, very good. Tyrone, anything else?
All righty. Well, I'll definitely take that. I think that that's really good advice from both Steve and Jay today. I want to take a few minutes just to thank both Jay and Steve for the time today. There's a lot of things you guys could have been doing. We're really appreciative that you took some time out to speak with our the people that have joined in on our call today. There's a couple of, speaking of thanks, there's a couple other people that I want to make sure that get acknowledged in other groups as well. So extending a big thanks to Jan Crochelle. She's another co-chair, not on camera, but here on the conference, and was instrumental in helping get this up and running. Also, thanks to Alicia Morris, who's producing the webinar and running the brains of the operation behind the scenes. Big thanks to the ICOVA Planning Committee. There's so many people that I can list there, as well as Serve Illinois and the ABA Board. Everyone's fantastic work made this conference a possibility. Before we head out, a couple of things I want to remind you of. You'll receive an email later today that has a lot of information in it. It'll have a survey for you, as well as recordings of the conference. So you can share that out with anyone that you know. The more people that see this, the better. So don't feel shy about sharing out the conference today. We're really happy for you to do that. We'll also try to get some of the questions that were not answered via the sessions answered in a Word doc that we can share out with everyone as well. That email will contain a survey, and I will put the survey link in the chat function now. Feel free to take that survey. It also will be emailed out to you. So we really appreciate your feedback. Be as candid as you can. All feedback is anonymous. It really helps the ICOVA Planning Committee plan out the future conferences when we hear directly from you what you liked, did not like, and want to see more of. So we really, really appreciate that. And the last thing I'll add for you is that if you indicated in the registration process that you would like to be connected with AVA, DAVA, Volunteer Stewardship Network, the Chicago Cultural Group, expect some communication from those groups in the upcoming weeks about how to get involved with those groups. One of the things that I'm excited about is just ongoing education and connection with other volunteer administrators. And wherever you find yourself, there is a way to do that. And so I'm really excited about those groups that have found ways to connect with people all across the Chicagoland area to kind of further this kind of what we were here to do today. So with that being said, thank you so much for joining today. I feel like I know where we go from here, and I hope that you all know that as well, and I hope you all have a great day. Thanks for joining the conference.
Thank you, everyone.
Well done. Thanks so much for inviting me to participate. Bye.
Bye, everyone.